All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Chris Tomlinson. Chris is a reporter for the Houston Chronicle and the author of the new book, Tomlinson Hill, which you can find at tomlinsonhill.com. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so Chris, in this book, you decided to chronicle your family's past history as slave owners, and it's a really, really amazing story. And I guess let's begin. Discuss for us what actually led you to examining this aspect of your family's past.
Well, when I was a little kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, my grandfather used to brag that our family had held slaves and that the slaves had loved us so much they took Tomlinson as their last name. And as a little kid, that's a pretty interesting story, and I was and he was trying to teach me to be proud of it. Now, my father, who kind of rejected my grandfather's racist view of the world, didn't really appreciate him sharing that story, and so it didn't go much beyond that, except that there was a place called Tomlinson Hill that had been a slave plantation before the Civil War. So I've always carried that with me, and it was only after I'd been a foreign correspondent in the Middle East and Africa and witnessed so much bigotry and ethnically driven warfare that I decided that I wanted to take a look at my own family's history of ethnic violence.
So, describe the process. So, how did you actually go about this? How did the research begin, and what did you actually find?
Well, when I returned to Texas in 2007 after living in Africa, the first thing I needed to do was go to Tomlinson Hill. I'd never been there as a child. It was not a place that my father was really interested in. So I drove, from my home in Austin, Texas, up to Falls County and found a Confederate reunion ground that my family had donated and built in the early 1900s. It's still standing today. It's a wooden pavilion with barbecue pits and a historical marker. And from that point forward, it was just a matter of digging through public records and conducting almost 200 oral histories of people from the Hill and from the families.
And again, one of the things that your grandfather bragged about was that a bunch of African American slaves kept the name. It's something that's fairly common that happened to a lot of slaves. They kept the names that that was forced upon them, I suppose. So I guess the line that came down, this other family of Tomlinsons, that there are Black Tomlinsons, has a really kind of storied past here. So tell us about that family line.
Well, I first learned about the Black Tomlinsons and where I could find them from my father, who was a big college football fan, and I was talking to him from overseas, and he said that there was this amazing running back who was playing for Texas Christian University, and his name was LaDainian Tomlinson. He was Black, and he was from Falls County, Texas. And that could only mean one thing, that he was the descendant of the slaves my family held. So he was my first lead on tracking down the Black Tomlinsons. I met his mother first, and his aunts and uncles and siblings who still live in Falls County, and began this amazing journey of learning about this side of my family that I had no idea existed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess let's go back to your side of the family, and then we'll get to the other side of the family too. Let's go back to I guess call it the white side of the Tomlinsons and the Black side of the Tomlinsons. So, on the white side, what did you find out about the fact of the plantation? What are the facts you found out about it? Because I know you found some letters, you found some documents. What exactly did you actually find from your side of it here?
Well, I found a collection of letters that my family had exchanged over the years in a book that a distant relative had put together in the 1960s. I also found that those letters were being kept at the Bullock collection at the University of Texas at Austin. So they were this fascinating window into how a slave plantation operates. And there was a relative named Churchill Jones who was married to a Tomlinson, a woman who was the first Tomlinson to stand on Tomlinson Hill. And he wrote these detailed explanations of how to maintain the health of the slaves, how to build their quarters, how to build a house for him and his families so that he could ultimately move to Texas. And he also detailed how to beat slaves, the proper use of force, how you can't possibly rely on anything but violence to make sure that you got the maximum output from the labor. It was a cold calculation. He was an entrepreneur, and he really did see these people as machines, and whipping them was like changing the oil on an engine.
How I can't even imagine what you might think when you're looking through this and finding that your ancestors are writing something so awful. I mean, like, what's going through your head when you're reading these letters and just kind of, I mean, because like, I think it's it's the right thing to do, right? I mean, I think one of these things that as white Americans, we need to coldly look at what our history is, and that's what this part of this book is. You're actually coldly looking at what the reality was. But what's going through your head as you're reading these letters and seeing your ancestors be so cruel to other human beings? What's going through your head when you read that?
Well, it's the realization that my worst fears were true. I mean, I grew up being proud of being a fifth-generation Texan. I grew up with lots of people around me who said, oh, yes, my family held slaves, but we were the good slaveholders. Wow. I even used to say that. And that's because that's what the dominant culture in Texas believed in, is that there was such a thing as good slaveholders, which is absurd on the face of it, but it's still out there, and it's still something I hear all the time. So when I found these letters, it was the truth. It was an opportunity to understand the decisions that my ancestors had to make, the dilemmas that they faced. They went on to, later generations would join the Ku Klux Klan, participate in lynchings, and it was 12 years a slave, only I was the descendant of Epps, the slaveholder.